the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. I'm Terry Bryant. I'm the director of the Homeless Service Center at Opportunity Council, and I chair this meeting. And it would be great if you could introduce yourselves in the chat and throw your email in there too, if you want to make sure that you get on our list for future agendas and updates, and also advocacy opportunities. And I'm going to do something crazy and try to set a poll. I think we need to look at this poll as a straw man poll, because things have changed since we discussed whether we should have meetings in person again or continue virtually. And I suspect that the Delta variant will change the guidance. So please don't consider this your official vote of things that will happen, but more like your preference when it's safe to gather. I'm going to go and launch the poll. And if you could just let us know your preference, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. Overwhelmingly, people want to continue virtually. So that's good to know. Here's how the vote looks. 75% would prefer a virtual platform. Okay, thank you. Today's topic that was set by the steering committee is a focus on families with children, and we have a really great panel of folks to talk about their programs and what makes serving families with children special. Thank you very much for the folks here to speak, and they are Jordan Romager from Opportunity Council. Is Brittany here too, Jordan? Yeah, Brittany Schulten, Opportunity Council, Dan Reese from Northwest Youth Services, Carolyn Roy from Interfaith, and Ashley, I didn't see if Ashley came in, I didn't see her name, from Ashley Thomason from Lydia Place. So I think we'll just go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to start at the top of my list, unless someone else wants to go first. But Jordan, do you mind kicking us off here? Feel free to share your screen if you'd like.
Sure, I'll go ahead and do that. Oh. Sorry, technical difficulties.
I think we're all used to those by now.
Are you able to see my presentation yet? Oh, nope.
Yes.
That's not right.
But I see your notes and the presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, how's that? Okay, thank you for bearing with me. All right. Okay, thank you for having us today and allowing us to discuss the way that our family programs are supporting the strategic plan to end homelessness in Bellingham. We believe that our programs really represent two of the main pillars for the strategic plan: collaboration and case management. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the programs that I supervise and the various strategies that they fall under in the strategic plan. So the first one is the emergency motel program. So the main focus is strategy 6, which is interim housing. So this program is a program that provides emergency shelter in local motels for families with unsheltered children. The priority for this program is for families who are literally homeless, so sleeping in tents or in vehicles with their children, with no family supports or resources to pay for short-term shelter. Traditionally, this program has been the most robust during the winter months to provide shelter from extreme weather, although during COVID, we've kind of ramped that up to year-round for the time being. Once a family is safely placed in a motel, their case manager begins providing intensive case management and working with them to address their goals. For most clients, this looks like preparing them for programs through coordinated entry by helping them gather documentation that they need. Case managers also support them in finding support in other areas of their life that contribute to overall stability, such as connecting them to resources for employment to increase income, meeting needs for their children, such as school enrollment or supporting them in getting childcare, access to substance use treatment if that's something they're interested in, and help with basic things like food and transportation. Case managers are also just very strong advocates for the clients when it comes to applying for housing units if they reach a point where they have enough income to do that while they're still in the motel program. Another area that supports the strategic plan is diversion and housing pool case management. So these two programs address strategy 1, which is the centralized point of entry, and then strategy 5, which is homelessness prevention and diversion. So our housing pool case manager works with clients who have come through coordinated entry and are waiting for programs in the housing pool. Often these families need medium or long-term programs to achieve stability. So the housing pool case manager works with them to collect the documents that they need to prepare for program entry, and also provides other supports that motel case managers the same supports that motel case managers provide to them as well. We also work very closely with the Whatcom Homeless Service Center staff when clients are eligible for referrals. The housing pool case manager has established rapport with the client, so she offers program referrals to the clients and then helps create that warm handoff between our organization and their program placement. And then the family diversion case manager works specifically with clients who are already experiencing homelessness, but who may have supports in place, such as income or family that they could work with, and they just need intensive short-term case management to potentially resolve their situation. So this can include things like family reunification, deposit assistance, or assistance with travel to a new town or city where they might have a support network in place. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brittany to talk about her programs.
All right, so I'm going to start off by talking about Family Rapid Rehousing. So this program offers supports to families who are looking for permanent housing in the community through a short-term subsidy that's paired with case management services. And so typically the subsidy is about 3 to 6 months, and families pay approximately 30% of their income towards rent. Case managers provide kind of an array of services to support clients in this process. So to name a few, we have housing search support, landlord advocacy, budgeting and life skills acquisition, and resource referral for things like employment, childcare, health needs, etc. Case managers also provide a lot of different problem solving support. So around things like writing letters of explanation for criminal history, paying off. We've been able to help pay off some past debts that clients owe to former landlords in order to make it a little easier for them to get approved with a new landlord. And we've been able to help with things like finding funding to meet basic needs such as car repairs so that clients can do housing search and employment search and things like that. We aim for households to exit rapid rehousing once they can afford their full rent at their current unit, or find other permanent housing solutions that fit their budget. So like working with the Bellingham Housing Authority. And then the other program that I supervise that works with families is called Hssp, or the Homeless Student Stability Program. Which I know we have Dan here from Northwest Youth Services who works with youth in that program. So he will also talk a little bit about that as well. But this is a program that is a partnership with the school districts in Whatcom County to serve families who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And so our referrals actually come straight from the homeless liaisons within the schools. And in this program, we're working to connect families to any programs they may be eligible for and help them with whatever permanent housing goals they have. We provide support services to help achieve housing stability. So kind of a wide array of different things we've been able to provide funding for, but some examples are food, clothes, gas cards are really important, birth certificates if they need that for like a BHA program. Sometimes we've been able to help out with like immigration fees so that people can legally work. And then of course, like application fees and stuff like that for housing. The Hssp program is really unique in the sense that it can serve at-risk families, whereas most of our other programs are targeting literally homeless families. So by serving at-risk families, we can serve families who are couch surfing, doubled up, even paying for their own motel, or renting with a notice to vacate. And the Hssp program is really great because we've seen that it really contributes to academic success for students, kind of that partnership between the school system and the homeless system, and just kind of all of us collaborating together for the success of the student and the family. We also have a bilingual Hssp case manager that works with a lot of our Spanish-speaking families, which has been really great. The schools do a lot of outreach as well to make sure that they're reaching out to families that may not have been able to access our services otherwise. So it's a really great partnership that we have with the school district and with those homeless liaisons, because we work really well together to kind of support both sides of that coin.
And then the last piece we kind of wanted to touch on was the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that we are doing here at Opportunity Council within housing. So the first one, firstly, I just want to say an understanding and response to equity and inclusion in all of its forms is central to Opportunity Council's values. And also, most importantly, to ensure that our programs address the fact that homelessness disproportionately affects people of color. So one of the ways that we work towards addressing this is through employee diversity, equity, and inclusion committees, and an employee DEI advisory panel, which are each focused in different areas. Our client barriers committee reviews and improves the client-facing systems and access points within the agency to ensure that we're reaching people of color and that our resources are compatible for a diversity of different needs. In order to increase access to resources and prevent homelessness, our agency housing services have increased partnerships with organizations that directly represent and serve communities of color. Through these partnerships, organizations are contracted to facilitate access to housing resources through trusted and embedded relationships. Within our housing programs, we have also recently added an outreach position focused on providing case management and outreach services to create connections with populations and communities not seeking housing assistance through mainstream access points. This position's work focuses on working with communities to identify barriers and establishing better systems and services to assist and serve marginalized populations. These marginalized communities include ethnic and racial minorities, immigrants and refugees, individuals who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, individuals with disabilities, or who are deaf and Native Americans. This position will also serve as a link to connect people who are misrepresented in data to our services. OC values ongoing professional development to ensure staff understand diverse populations and provide culturally appropriate services. So staff are receiving ongoing training and developments. And here you can see a list of some of the trainings that we've provided to staff in the past. And then finally, Brittany kind of mentioned this with Hssp, I believe, but our case management team includes bilingual and bicultural case managers who have developed relationships across the Latinx community of families in Whatcom County and provide culturally appropriate services to families needing housing stability supports. And we also have translation services that are readily available in all languages so that we can provide timely translation and communication for families.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We appreciate your work on that presentation. Dan, are you okay?
I apologize for the artwork.
Dan, do you want to go next?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
PowerPoint presentation. I'm sorry for that. So I'm the Hssp case manager for Northwest Youth Services. We subcontract for that grant through Opportunity Council. So OC is the primary grantee. I work with the unaccompanied youth. So the way it works in the school system is if someone is homeless, the way that works for them is if they're homeless, they're just not living with, if they're unaccompanied, it means they're not living with their primary guardian. And the schools also use doubled up as a criteria for homelessness. So when those kids are not living with their legal guardian, usually that's the parent or whoever the legal guardian is, they can be referred to me for supportive services. We have some flexible funding, which we can use for basic needs, as well as motel spending. Of course, that spends money really quickly. But the main focus of the grant is that case management and trying to stabilize the housing for these youth. There's a lot of, we do a lot of referrals into other Northwest Youth Services programs. Many of the kids, probably more than half of the kids that I work with are over 18. So if they're eligible, we also try to refer them into Opportunity Council or the Whatcom Housing Service Center, other housing programs that they might be eligible for. But there is a lot of just general support stuff that I end up doing, getting ID documentation lined up. Brittany went through some of the kind of supports that we do, fuel and gas support for kids are big ones. And then I also just serve as sort of a point of contact for kids who still are in school, who may not know about any of the social service supports that we have in the county. That I can be the first person that they can talk to get them lined up with those referrals. So it's been a really successful program. We've gotten a lot of kids cycled into our PAD program, into our adult housing programs, into housing through Housing Service Center referrals as well. It's been pretty remarkable. I don't know if there were other questions that I should address.
We'll have a Q&A here shortly. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate that. Carolyn, are you okay to go next?
Sure. I'm Carolyn Roy. I'm the program director for Interfaith Coalition and the Family Promise program. I do not have a PowerPoint, but that was really pretty. I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about Interfaith Family Promise because it might be a little bit confusing, and then go through where we've been and where we're at right now, where we hope to be. So Interfaith is a nonprofit organization with over 40 faith communities. We pool volunteer and financial resources to address the needs of the marginalized and turn our faith into action in Whatcom County. We began by addressing healthcare needs of families in the 80s with the development of the Interfaith Community Health, which is now Unity Care Northwest. And currently we're focused on shelter and housing for families experiencing homelessness. Interfaith has between 12 and 14 transitional and shelter homes on average. Right now we're utilizing 12. 8 of the homes are owned outright by Interfaith. 3 are congregation-owned homes, and 1 is a master lease with the city of Ferndale. Traditionally, these homes have been case managed by Opportunity Council, a couple of them by Lydia Place. In 2018, Interfaith added the Family Promise program, and Family Promise is a national organization that began in 1985 in New Jersey. There's over 200 affiliates in 43 states throughout the nation. Originally, Family Promise began as a rotational shelter model. It was a way to find a cost-effective solution to housing families experiencing homelessness by utilizing congregation space that was mainly vacant during the week, and then taking the volunteers from those congregations to help kind of as a hospitality network is what it would be called. This is how we started out in April of 2018. We had 13 host congregations that would host up to 5 families overnight for 1 week at a time, 4 times per year. And about 18 support congregations would help with the hospitality piece and providing meals and overnight stays. During the day, the families had a permanent place to go. They had a permanent address at our day center, which is what also housed our offices. Families had showers and laundry, extensive case management, a place for providers to meet, personal closets that they had there. So their main space was during the day, and then they would rotate at night. The benefits of this model were that trained volunteers could provide coordinated compassion, creating a sense of community and connection and support for families. Relationships developed organically, and resources like job leads, access to childcare, and car donations took place. When COVID hit, our rotational model was shut down. We shut it down completely, and we moved the families into a congregation next door to our day center, where they had their own rooms and their own bathrooms. That was a temporary solution, and it lasted about 6 months. In that meantime, we were hoping that we could secure a static site so that we would do the rotation, but with the volunteers, not the families, and keep the families in one place. That didn't work out yet. So what we had for the static site were the places for the families to stay, and then the volunteers would bring meals and groceries and things like that to the day center, and the families would rotate their time in the day center to get the services that they need and do showers and laundry and all of that. And we switched everything to Zoom. When we couldn't get the static site, we decided to take the shelter homes that were being case managed by Opportunity Council and start putting the Family Promise families in there. And we called it a scattered site model. And so we have the Family Promise case management and everything through the scattered sites right now. We also added 2 bridge homes for families that were exiting Family Promise shelter, but were maybe Ellis families or families that didn't quite qualify for subsidies and needed additional rental history and support. So we have 2 bridge homes. We have 4 scattered sites, static shelters for families right now. Also, we've developed a learning center that opened in the late spring. It's a soft opening. We recruited retired educators to tutor students in Family Promise and our other housing. And also we created, so that we could still have that connection between the volunteers and the families, an online recipe book where families and volunteers contributed. And then the families pick out meals, and there's meal kits that are delivered by volunteers to the families, as well as toiletries or special occasion things, school supplies, anything that the families may need. Let's see. The Learning Center, we're now thinking we're going to expand to include enrichment opportunities. We already have arts and crafts workshops going on, sewing classes, story time. We're going to add music lessons and GED tutoring. And let's see, what else? Resources that we give the families, extensive case management, referral to agencies, legal counsel, language services, meal kit deliveries, financial classes, access to the Parenting Academy, Fresh Start program with one of our congregations that also works with Opportunity Council to give out household items when a family moves, and vouchers with Habitat for Humanity for furniture donations. We also have done car donations to families. So we're also hoping that the tutoring and these other enrichment opportunities will provide the aftercare, that families don't have to leave the tutoring program or anything like that after they leave our housing. Let's see, what else? As far as what we've done to address equity and inclusion in our work, all of the staff's been trained in DIA training through Family Promise National and C4 Innovations through the Basuk Center. We're doing a deep dive into board and staff makeup, how we recruit, who is missing from the table. Family Promise National provides trainings, updates policy changes, and has a guest advisory council. We've added Wi-Fi, complimentary Wi-Fi to our homes that we own so that the families have access to that. We're all updated in our fair housing training, trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing, and harm reduction. And this past month, we received a Help Us Move In matching grant through Family Promise National. And we're actively looking to match funds to begin serving families in diversion and prevention. And we'd love to collaborate with other community partners in that. And I think that's about all.
Thanks, Carolyn. Really appreciate that. Ashley, it's your turn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Thomason, and I'm the Housing Program Director at Lydia Place. And Carolyn, I don't have a PowerPoint either, so you're in good company. So you just get to hear me blab for the next little bit. Lydia Place, so our mission is to disrupt the cycle of homelessness for current and future generations. So with that effort to break the generational cycle, our services are primarily targeted to families with children. As far as housing goes, we've been providing housing services for over 30 years now. We provide rapid rehousing, which Opportunity Council talked about that model a little bit earlier. It's finding apartment placements in the community and offering a short-term rental subsidy with intensive case management and services paired with that. We also provide permanent supportive housing. We have a partnership with the Bellingham Housing Authority, and we have 79 set-aside units for us to fill with families experiencing homelessness and provide ongoing intensive case management as long as the families are in that unit. And then we also have our own facilities that we own and operate, a mix of standalone apartments and communal living as well. And we are really exciting. We're building a new apartment building. Right now we're hoping it'll open in February, March of 2022. It's going to be called Hart House, and it's an 11-unit apartment complex. And it's going to be a mixed use building with child care facilities as well, since access to childcare is such a need here. All of our services, all of our housing programs include intensive case management. We really focus our case management on being client-led and focused on supporting them in achieving their own goals that they have for their family, aimed towards self-sufficiency. In terms of what makes Lydia Place Services unique, so we know that housing is a big step and an important step, but it's also only the first step. And as we've been around the community for a really long time now, we, a number of years ago, started to see clients come through that were children of our programming 20, 30 years ago. And that's when we knew we really needed to evolve and do more than just housing. There's a statistic out there that over 30% of parents experiencing homelessness reported experiencing homelessness during their childhood. And we know that adverse childhood experiences greatly impact the likelihood of somebody experiencing homelessness as an adult. And so our first step of that evolution was to create a parent support program for families who've experienced homelessness. It can be nearly impossible to maintain the safety, stability, and consistency kids need to thrive. And so our parent support program offers both short and long-term evidence-based programming to help parents rediscover the joyful side of parenting and to help mitigate the effects of trauma on children, in hopes that they're the last generation in their family to experience homelessness. A few years ago, we also realized that there was just a huge and growing gap in access to mental health care, and that when a client could access it, there were a lot of barriers, even if they were able to get a spot somewhere. And so we, a few years ago, also launched a clinical mental health program. And so that provides in-home mental health services, which eliminates a lot of the barriers to accessing clinical care, and it provides mental health services for both parents and children. And so we're able to really have, with all these three different buckets, have this really holistic wraparound approach to the services we provide. We work really hard to make sure all of our work is centered in the philosophy of being trauma informed. We recognize that trauma impacts the lens that we all move through the world with. And so centering our services in being trauma informed and understanding the ways that trauma has impacted our families and the way they might engage with us is really critical in providing accessible and quality services. So we also understand that might mean we need to be creative and really persistent in our approach to engaging and working with families that come through our doors, and try to be as flexible to make our services as accessible as possible. In addition to case management, we really want to support our families in building up their own support networks, whether that's natural support networks or engaging with places they're already getting support from. So we're active collaborators with other agencies such as the Opportunity Council, Bridget Collins, the school districts. We really believe that we're better together when we can all kind of come together and rally around the families that we're working with. As far as incorporating equity and inclusion and diversity into our work, we're doing a lot and working on a lot of things. And I'll also be the first to say we're not perfect, and we still have a long ways to go. We continue to offer robust annual trainings for all of our staff and have it be something our onboarding and philosophy is deeply rooted in. Outside of trainings, there's kind of three main ways that I see us incorporating diversity and equity and inclusion into our work. One is ensuring equitable outcomes for marginalized populations that we serve. Part of that is we're currently in the process of trying to develop a mechanism where we can really look at our outcomes and do some good program planning and evaluation around that. And we're also having a new database built because part of that is having good access to data. And that's been something that's been a little bit challenging. And so I'm really excited for what that can mean for us to do some better, what am I trying to say? Just look at those pieces more holistically and help us plan and continue to improve the services. We also have a diversity and equity committee that is actively looking at Lydia Place policies and procedures and a whole host of various things to make sure we're applying that lens throughout every place we possibly can in our agency. But outside of the diversity and equity committee, we also regularly encourage these conversations and encourage staff to participate in calling out policies and procedures that no longer serve us or our clients well, and really have some good questioning there. And if they're noticing anything in the work that they're doing, to bring that up as well. I can think of one example of a case manager bringing up recognizing that all of the clients that weren't doing well and were being placed on a contract were clients of color. And so that really gave us a good example of starting to look at why is that and what is not working, that this is happening. And so that's something that we try to continue to build into our culture of staff actively participating in recognizing and engaging in those conversations. We also have translation services so that we can be as accessible as possible when we're serving clients that speak a different language. Another way that so that was kind of the first one, ensuring equitable outcomes. The second one is looking at our hiring practices and making sure that those are equitable and that we are continuing to evaluate how we're recruiting and that we're hiring diverse populations, including former clients in that mix. And then 3, incorporating client voice. And this is something that we're still have room to grow on. We have some goals that we're working on, which include developing a tool for regularly soliciting client feedback throughout their care with us, and also at exit. One example of something we've done recently that went really well is we needed to create a new assessment tool that would help kind of guide creating service plans for clients. And so we had we compensated clients to be a part of a focus group to develop that tool, and had a really great experience. And it's been a really awesome tool for us to launch and use now. One thing I don't think we've touched on much here is just how COVID has impacted the work that we do. And I could probably fill a ton more time talking about that. But I thought I'd just give a couple pieces of information and contextual information. Family homelessness has doubled since the beginning of the pandemic. And as we know, we haven't even really seen the effects of the eviction moratorium ending either, and how that might impact an increase in numbers. There's really limited emergency shelter resources for families with children. So we've turned to motel placements as an intervention in an effort to not only keep vulnerable children off our streets, and but also mitigate that childhood trauma. However, this is really costly, and it's not going to be a sustainable solution long term. And so we're starting to look at what other alternative trauma-informed interim housing interventions could look like. But that's also hard because we want to keep our eye on the prize of getting upstream of the solution and continuing to invest in permanent housing. Other ways that COVID has impacted, besides just loss of work and income, lack of childcare has been a big issue. So even if our families can find work, finding childcare so that they can go to work is even harder than it already was before. And then we're seeing a ton of rent increases. There was a freeze on rent increases for a while, and I've heard since that freeze ended this last month, a handful of notices have been issued for family units, 2 and 3 bedrooms. We're seeing an average of an increase of $200 to $400 a month. I know there was one I just happened to be in the loop on of a 2-bedroom that was originally $1,125, I believe, and it went up over $200 to $1,340 something. And so this is causing, especially in our rapid rehousing programs, clients that maybe would have been able to exit the program are now they're not able to because they can't afford that big jump in rent. So it's delaying them moving off of our program so that we can serve more families. In some cases, we might need to rehouse them because it's just not going to be sustainable long term, or maybe we were still paying their rent and now it's above what we can contractually pay for because it's way so far out of fair market rents that we need to rehouse them. And so that just takes additional time and money and resources from the system. And so I think we're going to continue to see a lot of these big impacts coming, and there's certainly more than that, but just to give a little bit of insight to some of the challenges we're currently coming up against. That's all I have.
Thanks, Ashley. And I want to add that Mike Parker has put some information in the chat, some resources about the eviction moratorium and bridge period, and also Whatcom Low Income Housing Alliance for some updates and resources. So check the chat if you're interested in that. And we'll open up a Q&A session. Feel free to unmute and just ask, or if you're more comfortable to put it in chat, I'm fine to read your question. And if it's to someone specific, just let me know. And thank you very much, Jordan, Brittany, Dan, Carolyn, and Ashley. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
I don't see any questions, but that's okay. I have one to ask. My question for anyone on the panel is, how is serving families with children different than working with other populations?
I would
We
say,
don't really, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Carolyn.
I would say we don't work specifically with other populations at a deep level. I would say childcare, access to childcare so that families can be working, and rentals are much, much higher for more bedrooms. And so those are two things. And then the school schedules when families are working and trying to figure that out.
I can add to that. There's more people. We want to look at the whole family in terms of services and health. And so that can take its own bit of time to get to know and make sure each individual family member is getting their needs met. Also, sometimes with larger families, there can just be additional challenges in terms of finding an affordable unit that's the right size, in terms of if we're going to put them in a motel, and it could be long-term because it could be a few months before they are able to move in somewhere. A family with 3-4 kids, like that's actually not that great to be, even though it's better than on the streets, like that's not great to be in a motel room for that long period of time. I don't know. I know there's more I'm not thinking of right now, but those are some of the unique challenges that I can think of that come up.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially like during COVID, we really noticed that with parents having to shift to, essentially like homeschooling their children, that time that kids would be at school and kind of giving parents a bit of a break and a breather to be able to take care of some of their other needs and, work towards some of their more personal goals like employment or increasing their income. That time was like essentially taken away from parents with school-age children. So that's something we definitely saw, kind of like Ashley was mentioning in our rapid rehousing programs. We have quite a bottleneck right now too, because, so many of those families are still kind of recovering from that shift to having to do kind of at home learning and schooling. So that really didn't allow folks to have a lot of time to focus on other things. And I mean, I think when you're a single individual, you just have a little bit more time and energy to focus on your own goals. So.
I don't have much to add to that, but I would say also when families get into units, some neighborhoods or apartment complexes are more or less child friendly as well. We've seen families moving into apartment complexes and then very quickly receiving notices about their children not being allowed to play in certain areas or different things that are happening where the environment is just more challenging sometimes, or it seems like they're being watched more closely, and case managers need to kind of intervene and advocate in those situations for families if the place that they're living is not as child friendly.
Mm-hmm. And also, especially if there isn't childcare, the ability to access other resources and services. So as I mentioned, for example, with our clinical mental health care, that you can't bring your kid with you to a therapy appointment. And so being able to have in-home services, and we've been able to like work things out, or sometimes bring volunteers or something to figure out childcare has been really helpful for us in terms of making sure our clients can access some of the health services that they need.
Just briefly, we'll add, I do work with some young people who are parenting, and that is of course extra difficult when you're in school and trying to balance that with being homeless. There's a pretty big gap in our homeless service system for parenting minors. So if you are under 18 and you're parenting, you could stay at the pad, but your infant child is going to be too young to stay at the pad. So they would have to stay elsewhere. So that there's not really a lot of very good options for those very young families, at least in this county. So having, if we could find solutions for that, or open up some of the guidelines on the licensure, it would be quite a bit easier for some of these families.
Carolyn, Joe Gibson has a question about how Family Promise receives referrals. Oh, you answered it.
Yes, mainly we use coordinated entry, although if we haven't sent in a referral request to coordinated entry and we have an opening, we can get direct referrals from some agencies. We get them sometimes from DVSAS, homeless liaisons. We're in constant communication with them. DSHS through Work First a lot in the 2018, 2019, not so much now. So that's kind of, so yes, coordinated entry, and we can do other referrals because we go through McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness for the family promise part of Interfaith.
Ooh, that gives me a good follow-up question. What is the difference between the McKinney-Vento definition and the HUD definition for coordinated entry?
Are you asking anyone to?
Anyone? Yeah.
I got it.
Okay.
So McKinney-Vento is the basically the law under which the homeless liaisons for the different school districts operate. They use HUD definition, but they also add in that if you are living in unstable housing circumstances. So it does not necessarily mean that you need to be literally homeless. If you are living with friends or living in an over-occupied unit, which is defined for non-cultural reasons, which is a funny carve out, then you could still qualify as homeless under the McKinney-Vento definitions. So it's just a broader term that takes into account people kind of couch hop or sometimes entire families kind of move in together, and that creates a homeless situation.
Yeah, so for coordinated entry, we follow a more strict definition by HUD. That's literal homelessness, so unsheltered, emergency shelter, or fleeing domestic violence. So family promise being able to use the broader definition, you can serve people who are in a poor situation, get them into emergency shelter, and then they become eligible for coordinated entry. So it's a really important resource in our community. Dana Briggs has a question. How many households with children have been 6 months or longer for housing? I can answer that question, but I need a few minutes to do the math. So why don't I ask another question while I do that? And that question is, how do you work with families who have a large criminal history or some poor rental history?
Yeah, we've seen this. We've seen this come up a lot in our motel programs, rapid rehousing programs. One of the main resources that we provide is writing letters of explanation for criminal history specifically. Case managers help clients walk through that process, submit those with their applications to try to address some of those concerns preemptively. And then we also have case managers helping clients potentially with quashing warrants and things like that, if those are active for various reasons. And then you said, besides criminal history, I think you were also talking about debt too.
Poor rental history or debt, probably property related debt is quite a challenge as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. We've seen a lot of families who owe money to prior landlords. We have been able to find access to funding resources that will allow us to help them make payments on that as long as it's still owed to the landlord. So families are often denied outright if there's any money owing to a prior landlord when they apply. And we have tried writing letters of explanation for that, and they just won't even look at the applications in that case. So helping them to pay off some of that debt has been pretty crucial for helping them to get into housing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say the same. We do a lot of letters of explanation for both criminal history, just helping the client like explain what the circumstances were and where they're at in their life now and what the housing opportunity would mean to them. We also do a lot of fundraising to get some client flexible funds. And one of the things that can be used for is paying off rental debt, because that tends to still be a really, really big barrier. And if it goes to collections in particular, we can help with that, but you usually need a large sum to be able to open up a payment plan. Even you often need about half down. So that can be really expensive. And it's not uncommon for someone experiencing homelessness to have been evicted, and then there's the legal fees, and it that debt can add up really fast.
I also encourage case managers to, as soon as they start working with somebody, if they have like criminal history, to kind of build like a portfolio. So like they have their letter of explanation, but I also encourage case managers to see what other supports they have in the community, whether that be like a probation officer, that they're in good standing with, or a therapist, or just somebody in the community. I think it's just helpful when people have multiple kind of letters of reference, or like character references, and just kind of explaining what the person's been through and kind of the progress they've made. So that can be really helpful to kind of go with a letter of explanation. Sometimes is like, here are these other kind of like supporting documents that support what I'm saying in the letter of explanation.
Mhm.
We've done the same thing with motel managers actually as well. So if a client's been living in a motel for an extended period of time and they've developed good relationships with staff and they've just been like excellent tenants of the motel, then they will be willing sometimes to write reference letters to kind of contribute to a sort of rental history in a way.
I would have to ditto everything that Brittany and Jordan and Ashley said. I think the main thing for us is we're addressing every family, not solely based on their history, but their willingness to work with case management to work on their barriers. And then we can do referrals to law advocates to explore options for sealing records and IDing personal references for them, or writing them if they've been in our program, and we can write a letter of explanation as well.
Thanks. To answer Dana's question, I can give you a pseudo answer. 30 of the, I think 100 families that are currently waiting for a housing program have been waiting for 6 months since they've applied. That doesn't mean how long they've experienced homelessness altogether. So that number is likely to be higher if we're looking at how long families have actually been homeless before seeking services.
And I would also add to that that clients in programs are having, or are waiting for a housing opportunity, or like a housing unit, for so much longer than they have in the past. I mean, it just seems to keep getting worse. We used to have families that came in and were able to find something, even with sometimes like criminal history. They were able to find something within a month or two. And I just keep hearing from case managers that they're like, I have this client who really doesn't have many barriers and they just can't find housing. So I think that just kind of speaks to the larger problem that we keep kind of, circling back to, which is just affordable housing right now. We're really seeing that impacting clients finding units.
Affordable housing and enough housing. We still have a really low, I believe it's like 1.9 still, below 2% vacancy rate. So there's just not a lot of units. And then on top of that, the few that are not affordable. So. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Oh, Joel.
Hi, Terry. Thanks. I'm Joel Kennedy. Some of you know me. I know there's some familiar faces here. First time I've actually been on this call with this committee, or coalition. Sorry. I do have a question, and I appreciate you, Ashley, touching on the challenges sort of upcoming here. As some of you know, I served on the Homeless Strategies Work Group through Whatcom County about a year ago, and I brought up the question at that time, is anybody looking ahead to what happens when the eviction moratoriums or the bridge program, the Washington State Bridge program expires? I did a rough model to estimate at that time, if the eviction moratorium were to expire, we would have had roughly a doubling of the number of homeless in Whatcom County. Is anybody doing any sort of prediction, model prediction, or trying to look ahead? I mean, things are sort of winding down here, and we're looking at possibly this fall when the weather starts changing, and we're going to be facing a lot more evictions, and just wondering if anybody's looking at that. I don't notice anybody on the Housing Authority on this call, but, you know, so I'm not sure if anybody can speak to that from that standpoint or not.
Joel, I can tell you a little bit about what we're working on with the county. We've been able to convene.
We've
been able to convene some of our partners, law advocates, Northwest Justice Project, Opportunity Council. I feel like my brain is slipping. Is that everybody? But we're meeting together. Oh, and Whatcom Dispute Resolution Center. We're meeting as a group regularly to talk about what we're looking at with the legislature, like what's coming our way. Our local court system here, the judges still have not officially put out what their guidelines are going to be on whether or not, if it's going to align with what state legislature is saying, the need for mediation or renters being able to tap into rental assistance programs before evictions can go forward. So I don't have like definitive, like this is what it is, but the resources are all there and we're talking to each other and we're making sure that the statements that are going out into the community all match each other. So there's funding. That's the one thing I want to get across. There is funding for this for rental assistance. The challenge is the workforce issue. We cannot get it out fast enough. People are working so hard to get it out and they're putting a lot of money out into the community to help pay the arrears. And some forward rent as well for folks who might not be quite there. And it also helps cover utilities. So it's just taking us a little bit of time. So we're really trying to make sure landlords are aware that it's available. And I will say, you know, I was able to look through some files. I was doing some reviewing and it came across one where there was, you know, a landlord that had received $30,000 in back rent. That's what this program could do. And so it's kind of that we want landlords to know if you can just hold tight. And I know it's so hard at this point, but if you can hold tight and keep those people housed, we can get that money to you. So that's kind of, we are looking forward to it. We're trying to figure it out and we're meeting regularly just so everyone's on the same page about what's coming our way.
So you're speaking specifically to the diversion programs, the eviction prevention.
Yeah, and that you know, there's a need for all the programs to be up and running before any kind of evictions can go forward. So the Dispute Resolution Center can work with landlords, do mediation with the tenants. So we've got those, all those programs are getting their feet on the ground and they're still kind of waiting for the final pieces. But the Opportunity Council's got the financial assistance up and running. Law advocates can also help. And Northwest Justice Project is looped in as well.
Do you have any situations or many situations where a landlord just refuses to work with an eviction prevention kind of program?
I can't speak to that one as much because we're not, the county, we are not doing the work. The Opportunity Council is doing that. I don't know if anyone here who's been working with it has come across that at all. Or Terry, if you would have any idea. I would imagine maybe there are some landlords who are just fed up, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if we have anyone from that team here right now, but I wonder if Jordan or Brittany have heard anything from your colleagues to that effect.
I haven't heard anything about that, but yeah, I'm also not super involved with that program, so.
I do supervise a case manager who specifically does outreach for rental assistance. So far, we have not, from what I've seen, at least run into very many situations where landlords aren't willing to work with the program. I think one of the only situations where they might not be as willing is if we're not able to pay the full amount that is owed. But we are able to go up to 150% of fair market rent with this program. So it's very unusual that we can't pay the full amount. I would say motel arrears is one of the only situations in the past where there might have been some hesitancy for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I'm wondering, I don't want to get too far off our agenda here, but HK asked some questions in the chat about winter shelter.
Yeah, I saw that, Heather. I think that HK is Heather. I could be wrong. We are working on it. I can speak to the severe weather side. That's the part that the health department's been tasked with. We have and I don't want to say the agencies yet. There are a couple newer agencies that are interested in being able to offer some kind of sheltering, very smaller scale for populations like older senior women or older women. There's another group that's interested in offering it for families. And I know we have motel stays for families, but we don't necessarily have anything at this point. If on 6 o'clock on a Friday night when it's really cold, there's not a shelter for families to be able to walk into that evening. So there's some possibility for that. So it's in the works, Heather, trust me. Unlike, I don't want it to be a last minute thing either. So we're doing everything we can now to try to build as much as we can before that time comes. I would also encourage folks, if you know agencies or organizations that are interested in being a part of this, we would love to talk to folks about offering severe weather shelter. I know the city has also been in communication with our ongoing partners who are so great to do this year round, like Base Camp, and then the CTK is partnering with them for the winter months, and they've extended their time that they're doing it. I think, is it October or November? But it's going through March. So there's just a longer window now as well that there'll be extra beds available. So we're working on it, I promise.
Thank you, Anne. Any other questions for our panel about families with children? Okay. Next agenda item is that we have some new additions to the steering committee. So want to welcome Dr. Melissa Osborne to represent higher education from Western, and Doug Gustafson from Homes Now Not Later to represent a housing provider. And we were able to do this because Pamela Kahn from Pioneer Human Services agreed to slide into the mental health representative role. So thanks for joining us. And the steering committee meets every month that this group does not to plan the next meeting. Okay, next thing on the item, City of Bellingham update. Katie, do you mind giving that?
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks.
Hi, folks. So on the city side, we have some updates on a few city-funded projects and initiatives. The first updates we have are for strategies targeted to families experiencing homelessness. The first update being our Families with Children Interim Shelter Facility, RFP. I believe Samia might have mentioned this in prior meetings, but last month, the Mount Baker Foundation and the City of Bellingham issued an RFP to evaluate our community needs surrounding families experiencing homelessness. This RFP outlines the need to conduct a feasibility analysis for a public-private partnership opportunity to develop an interim housing facility that will provide emergency shelter to families experiencing homelessness in our community. This has been spoken about at the front end of this meeting, but many of you know that this need is currently only being met by emergency motel stays. And the idea with this facility is that it would provide an alternative to motel stays. So last month we issued an RFP and we received impressive responses from 3 firms. Our core panel conducted interviews last week in order to guide our selection. I don't have any updates to share today as far as selection, but hopefully we should have an update soon. And we at the city are really looking forward to moving forward with our selected consultant and starting the work in helping to develop a clear project concept and begin the initial design and feasibility work. So stay tuned. On our motel contract, which aligns with a lot of the discussion that we've had already here today. You know, it's been mentioned by Jordan and Ashley each, but the city has executed a contract with the Opportunity Council to keep funding emergency motel stays for families with children experiencing homelessness. We're working in partnership with Whatcom County and the Opportunity Council and Lydia Place to strategize and secure funding in order to continue supporting motel stays for families with children. This really marks a relatively new effort for the city. Previously, we had only been funding motel stays through the winter months. All this to say, this is an ongoing concern on our side and will be something that we in the city are committed to continuing to mobilize around until both Base Camp and our permanent Families with Children facility that I mentioned previously are constructed, and hopefully these will minimize the need for family motel stays. On the rental and interim housing project side, have a few updates on different discrete projects in the community. The city closed on financing for the Sandwich Commons Phase 2 and 3 projects, and construction is expected to begin in the fall. The city closed on financing on the Barclay Family Housing Project. You heard this from Ashley earlier, but construction has begun on the Lydia Place Hart House project, and the Recovery House project has almost completed construction. And also we are in discussion with Northwest Youth Services about expansion plans. So that's what I've got for updates.
There's a question from Joel, if there's a link to the RFP that you could share.
Sure. I will put my email in the thread, Joel, and I can send.
Okay. Next on our agenda are updates from the county. And I have Barbara's name down, but Barbara, you said Chris was going to do it, right?
I think I'll get us started.
Okay.
And Chris is welcome to join in if you'd like. So the first thing I wanted to follow up on is, around the discussion about families with children. We've got some funding news that can be a great resource in this regard for help keeping families with children in motels over the coming winter. So we will be receiving new funding from the State Department of Commerce for non-congregate emergency shelter and also for rapid rehousing programs. They're estimating that we'll be receiving about 1.2 million, and I believe that's for a 2-year period of time. So this will be a whole new funding source for us, and will be very welcome, coming at a great time. We still have to have our application approved by Commerce, so we're awaiting that. We don't have the funds in hand yet, and I imagine it will be another month or two before we do. So we were very happy to hear that. We also will be seeing a significant increase in the Housing and Essential Needs Program. Again, funding from the State Department of Commerce, and this will be added to our existing contract with the Opportunity Council. HEN is for housing and essential needs for people that generally need rental assistance and case management, and also they're provided with some essential needs items, just for very basic needs, because they don't receive a lot of cash or income. So eligibility for that program is determined by DSHS, and program recipients are homeless or at risk of homeless. And the HEN program is not really intended to be a long-term program, but it helps fill a gap before they can get hopefully some permanent income. It's a program that is part of our consolidated homeless grant, and counties receive 2-year allocations. And I believe our new allocation will be about 600,000 more annually. So it's really significant. And then in other news, the point in time count was published in July by the Homeless Service Center and the Health Department. Chris worked very closely with the Homeless Service Center and getting the report completed. I believe I already entered, oh, there it is. Chris entered it again. There's the link to the document. So you can read our point in time count report. Just quickly, the number of individuals counted hit a new record high at 859. So that's obviously very troubling. The number of individuals in motels was increased by 225. The number of unsheltered individuals was exactly the same. there were 2,267 individuals that benefited from housing services in 2020. So, along with pointing out how the point in time hit a new record high, at the same time, there were over 2,000 individuals that did benefit from housing services. So it's important to keep, all of the big picture in mind. So if you have any questions or would like clarity about what the numbers mean, you can contact Chris, would probably be your best contact, or the Homeless Service Center. And maybe Chris, you can put your email address in the chat box if you don't mind. And then finally, I wanted to let everyone know that we are going to be increasing our behavioral health support in our permanent supportive housing programs. We've got three really pretty significantly sized permanent supportive housing programs: City Gate, 22 North, and Francis Place. And those programs serve people who have a history of chronic homelessness, many of whom have real significant behavioral health challenges. And so the county is going to be able to fund one position to be shared between 22 North and Francis Place. And I believe that contract can get started as of September 1st. We're hoping to be able to get some great applicants. It's tough times as far as hiring behavioral health providers, I understand, but we're looking forward to having more support for both staff and the residents of those homes in permanent supportive housing. So in the meantime, Pam, who is the clinician with Citygate, has agreed to, well, actually voluntarily, is providing a small portion of her 40-hour week to both 22 North and Francis Place. So we're really grateful to Pam for doing that. She's spending 2 to 3 hours a week at both programs until they can get someone on board. And that is probably running out of time, but does anyone have any questions about anything we've covered or other topics? Okay. I see a question in the chat box from Dina. Is there a way for the City of Bellingham, Whatcom County, the Whatcom County Health Department, and homeless services providers with social media presence to circulate info on the coalition meetings and agendas so that more community members will be likely to tune in? It seems like this would generate more awareness regarding possible respondents to RFPs and other ideas and inspiration for actions needed and that can be taken. Also, it may be helpful at generating more potential for people to volunteer during periods when demands warrant even greater community participation. Great suggestions.
I will say that the Homeless Service Center Facebook page does publish the agendas for the coalition, so follow that. Thanks, Marisa. And also, it's kind of my favorite thing to do at the end of the day is look and see what Marisa has posted, because there's a lot of move-ins and they're just, I call it the dessert of our work when someone gets the key to their home. Was there anything else from the county?
No.
I'll just throw in this last little bit here. If you are have an agency or you're affiliated with someplace and there is a need for vaccination in your area, please let me know. I can put my email address in there. We'd love to be able to figure out how to get more vaccines into the community for those. There might be folks who are apprehensive. We can talk a little bit about that. Figure out we just want to get more folks vaccinated with the new variant coming to town. Things are just getting a little bit more hectic. And I know all my colleagues at the health department are exhausted, and I don't want people to start leaving because we can't do another round of this. So please encourage folks in your world to get vaccinated. If you work at an agency or with folks who might need access to the vaccine, let me know and we'll figure out how to get it to you.
Thanks, Anne. Option for education of the Anne, is there an option for education on the safety of vaccinations? Is there a page on your site?
There are pages on the site, and then we also have been doing a lot of tabling at different places to have a public health nurse there available to talk to folks. So if there are places that are interested in having some of those conversations, let me know, and I can see if we can try to coordinate something. I don't know that we'll be able to go to everybody's house meetings, but we can figure out how to meet those needs so that education's there and maybe encourage more folks to get the vaccine.
Thanks, Anne. Something you just mentioned is everybody's getting real tired. The pandemic has created an entirely new layer of stress and challenge for everyone. And I want to acknowledge that, and it is showing in our workforce. So I know that mental health resources are tapped, and hiring folks is just very challenging right now. So since this next agenda item is the service center, I'm going to add that we're recruiting for a housing referral specialist right now, which is a pretty fun job because you get to call folks and explore housing options with them and sometimes offer them a program. So that position is open right now in the Homeless Service Center. I also want to talk a little bit more about the point in time count that Barbara mentioned, because it was a special year to conduct that count in the pandemic, and the methodology was different. We were discouraged from having volunteers. Usually there's a big recruitment effort in the community and a big training effort to get people who are willing to assist to understand how to complete the surveys and go out in the community and talk to people and count them. This year we were discouraged from doing that, and most of our count was done either with paid staff. I know Hot Team, my staff, other providers did a lot of surveys, and also through a database that most homeless service providers use called HMIS, stands for Homeless Management Information Systems. So we were concerned that maybe we wouldn't count everybody with those restrictions. And to make that even more complicated, the unsheltered counts was optional. And if you know Trace on the Hot Team, she was not about to skip the unsheltered count. It was very important that we do that. So we did conduct an unsheltered count. And we counted more individual people since 2008. So 2008, we counted 851. In 2021, we counted 859. And why? Is homelessness increasing? Is it because computer systems are different? I think probably both. So one big change is that the Lighthouse Mission is participating in that database I mentioned. So that data becomes a part of our count. So instead of having to go to the mission and catch people who are willing to be counted, we were able to measure who stayed there. So that could have something to do with the increase in sheltered people. We counted more households than ever before too. So in 2008, households, families with children, single people, couples, we counted 506 households. In 2021, we counted 625. And I have some thoughts on why that might be. Not only are we experiencing more, or we're seeing more families experiencing homelessness right now. Ashley mentioned that it doubled, but we also had more emergency shelter resources than we've had in the past. And not just the motel funding that Katie had mentioned. There was also additional funding for people enrolled in housing and essential needs that could help them motel safely away from congregate locations. And there was a big push for veterans as well to stay in motels. So that could have something to do why we counted so many more people in emergency shelter. We had more ability to shelter them. The unsheltered household number didn't change over last year. And I don't think that means that we have the same amount of unsheltered people. I feel that it means that a reflection of us having less volunteers in the community to count, frankly. And I have to just mention that the activity around the camp at City Hall coincided with the date of our point in time count. So that made it very challenging to count folks on that day. Commerce did allow us to count over a period of greater days, but when people are moving around during that period, it can be really challenging to figure out where everybody's gone and get them counted. The sheltered count I mentioned, I already talked about this. I don't know why I put that on my agenda twice. But that's the update from the service center. If anyone has questions about that or the service center, I'm happy to field those. Anybody? Otherwise, we can go ahead and move to public comment, or if you want to request other comments or other topics for future meetings, you're free to do that. You can unmute and speak or put it in the chat.
Hi, this is Dana.
Hey, Dana.
A lot of you know who I am, and I've been pretty much silent over the time of the pandemic. And by the way, I'm one of those that's been feeling the burden of the pandemic, having worked in the hospital this entire time, even if it is as a cook, because the hospital itself has been overloaded past the 100% capacity mark for months. But beside that fact, I want to give a shout out to every one of you that have dedicated your lives to trying to do something about homelessness. The problem is that we as a society over the last 40 or 50 years at a minimum have failed massively by driving the responsibility to solve this problem down to the local level. Every one of you has been in a triage mode. Just listen to what you have said to yourselves during the course of this meeting. You don't have enough resources, people, funding, places to put folks, and so on and so forth. The time has now come to push back on a national level from the grassroots up to say enough is enough. Okay? You have got to do this. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to put in the chat a link to a federal piece of legislation that has been introduced by Representative Cori Bush, who represents St. Louis, Missouri, which it references an unhoused Bill of Rights. And I want you to take a look at it, and if you as an individual or you as an organization can support this, you need to get a contact in her office and advocate for it. Surprisingly, and maybe not surprisingly, neither one of our congressional representatives, whether it's Susan Del Bene or Rick Larson, have co-sponsored this legislation. We need to put pressure on them to do that. You also need to speak with the state legislators in both the 40th and the 42nd legislative districts to do something similar for the state of Washington, okay? These are people, as you all well know, that we have been dealing with for months and years, and it's part of the reason why I asked the question about how many of these folks, just households with children, have been on the list for more than 6 months. That's an eternity for them. An absolute eternity. And put it bluntly, from my perspective, having lived in a motel now for more than 3 years in this county because I can't find affordable housing, and there's at least 20 other rooms in this motel that are occupied by people who have been here more than 6 months, who are not eligible for any programs whatsoever through the Opportunity Council or anybody else because they make too damn much money, but they don't make enough to be able to afford a place. It's vile, it's disgusting, and we need to do something about it. So this is all hands on deck, people, all hands on deck. Again, I applaud each and every one of you for doing what you have been doing, but now it's time for us to scream to the rafters that we are not going to put up with it anymore. So I'm asking you to do whatever you can to support the federal legislation, get something working on the state level, and I will support you in every way, shape, or form that I can, but I'm not putting up with it any longer. So thank you.
Thanks, Dana. That's a really important perspective. And I think about that a lot because what am I trying to say? It's not enough to have subsidies, right? We need more affordable housing. And Greg Winter would agree with you that this effort needs to come from the national level down. So thank you for those comments. Any other comments, questions, announcements? I'm not on mute, am I? Okay. Okay. Well, if there's nothing more, I just want to thank everybody for spending an hour and a half with me. The next meeting will be October 7th. And it sounds like most likely virtual since 75% of you prefer this way to attend. So we'll see you then in October. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you, Terry.